everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Witliffe Gallery of Southwestern and Mexican Photography. I'm Connie Todd. I'm the curator here. And this is a terrific evening, a wonderful turnout. Thank you all for coming. And I'm so sorry about the UT game, but así es la vida, as we say in Spanish. But I'm glad you got it together to make your way over here, and I know some of you are from San Marcos and Wimberley, a little closer to home. We're here tonight to celebrate the exhibition of photographs by Bill Wittliff called La Vida Brinca, and also the inauguration of his book. I hope all of you have a chance to buy one. This is a unique opportunity to have it signed by the photographer and also by both of the authors of the introductory essays, Steve Harringan and Elizabeth Ferrer, who are both with us tonight. So this is a triple threat, and I know for sure I'm going to get mine signed by everybody. So I hope you can all do that. After the discussion, they'll be seated appropriately in front of the signage to do the book signing. I really want to recognize the wonderful staff here at the Witliffe Gallery and the Writers Collection, because they do everything and help out and make sure that evenings like this progress smoothly. They're all very shy. They're like the oryx or the greater kudu, and they hide in the bamboo. But let's see, is Carla Ellard, are you anywhere near? No, where is she? Anyway, Carla is the assistant curator for the Witliffe Gallery, and she helps. She certainly helped with the hanging of this exhibit and the arrangement of the photos and the informational case that's at the end of the gallery, which I hope you all had a chance. It has Bill's pinhole cameras and so forth on display, and it's very informative about the process that he used to make these wonderful photographs. We have also Michelle Miller. There's Michelle, Beverly Fondren, Mary Garcia, Tina Ibarra, Steve Harrigan, I'm sorry, Steve Davis, our other Steve. Yeah, I know, I do, that happens all the time. You guys look alike. And Katie Saltzman and Joel Miner, our two archivists, are here as well. So they're a fabulous staff. They make me happy every day I come to work. We have a number of special guests as well this evening. We have some members of our newly configured advisory committee. We're very happy they're here. Faustinos Deraet, Steve Harrigan is on the advisory committee. John Payne, I believe, is here, and Bill Cunningham. Glad you all came. And if I left anyone out, is anybody else here on the advisory committee? Oh, yes, Miriam Echeverria and Avi Bonar. See, I just is terrible. And and Mark is here as well. Oh gosh. We also have some members of our steering committee. We're having an anniversary gala. It's the 20th anniversary of the Southwestern Writers Collection, the 10th anniversary of the Witliffe Gallery, and on May 27th, we're having a big shindig at the Four Seasons. This requires the work of many people, many volunteers, as well as staff members, and support from the university, which has been generous and forthcoming. And some of our steering committee members are here. Peggy Pickle is here. Barbara Morgan is here. There's Barbara. Elizabeth Crook is here. And Reed and Susan Witliffe are both here as well. And is anybody else here from the steering committee that I didn't recognize? Anyway, thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. I think it's going to be a wonderful evening, a great silent auction. So inform yourselves on the website and try to come and save the date. Most of you probably got save the date cards. We have as well the head of the library, Joan Heath, is here. She's the vice president. There's Joan. And our vice president, the vice president for information technology, Dr. Van Wyatt, is here as well. Yay, Van. And President Denise Trouth is here with us tonight as well. There's Denise. Thank you all for coming. We have, too, the founding donors of the collection. Bill is seated up here, and Sally's in the audience. Hooray. And some wonderful donors as well. Keith Carter and his wife Pat, who have been supporters of the collection for years, and we have a grand collection of Keith's work that we're very proud of. Also, I believe Mike Levy is here. He's responsible for the largest, there you are, for the largest single archive here at the Southwestern Writers Collection, and that's the Texas Monthly Production Archives. They live downstairs in the annex in brand new shelves, and we're extremely fortunate and proud to have those. And glad you came, Mike. And a new donor as well, and that's Mara Levy, who has helped support our upcoming book on Graciela Iturbide that will be out this coming fall. There's so many people I could go on, but I'll stop now. I think it takes a long time. As I was preparing introductions for the 3 panel members, I realized that it was probably going to take too long to really say everything that they've done. So I'll go through this pretty quickly. I always assume that everyone knows Bill Wittliff, but just in case some of you are not too familiar with who he is and what he's done, I introduced him a moment ago as one of the founding donors of the Writers Collection as well as the Witliffe Gallery. He's had a number of careers. A book publisher. He and his wife Sally started the Encino Press. He's a book designer as well, a screenwriter, a film producer and director, and a photographer, which is apparent from the wonderful show we've had tonight. And many of you have seen his Vaquero photographs as well as his Lonesome Dove photos. The Encino Press, Bill and Sally started when they were just babies right out of college, and by the time they were done, well, and they still are, it's true, young at heart, that's the important thing. But anyway, the Encino Press was in business, it was still publishing until about 1983. I think that was the last year of publication. And by the time that run of books was done, I think they had won probably at least over 100 awards for design and content. They're really beautiful books. If any of you are bibliophiles, I know you know about the Encino Press. Many people collect the books, even yet. And we have the remaining inventory of the Encino Press, which will be on our website very soon for sale. So there will be some of those books still out and about. Bill has written multiple scripts: Barbarossa, Raggedy Man, The Black Stallion, Honeysuckle Rose, Country, Red-Headed Stranger, The Cowboy Way, Legends of the Fall, The Perfect Storm, and he's probably best known for the CBS miniseries based on Larry McMurtry's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel called Lonesome Dove, which is also a multiple award winner. We have all of the production archives for Lonesome Dove and hope to have them exhibited in a permanent exhibition as relatively soon. We're looking forward to a nice exhibition space because people still come and they want to see Gus's hat and they want to see Tommy Lee's boots and the big Colt Dragoon. And so I think Lonesome Dove will be in our lives for a long time. Bill's first book of photographs came out just a couple of years ago. It was Vaquero. And now the second book is La Vida Brinca. He is the editor of the Witliffe Gallery series. He's now beginning work on a book of his Lonesome Dove photographs, which will be coming out in 2007?
2007.
In the fall, I believe, of 2007. He was very happy when Steve Harrigan and Elizabeth Ferrer agreed to each to contribute an essay to his book. We're delighted also that they were able to attend this evening and take part in the panel discussion. Many of you already know Elizabeth from her tenure in Austin as the executive director of the Austin Museum of Art from 1997 until 2001. She came from the famed America Society in New York as their curator and exhibitions coordinator, and then as director of the Visual Arts Department and curator. in the course of her career as a museum consultant, lecturer, curatorial consultant, and administrator, she's also found time to write essays, introductions, entries in at least 9 books. She's written numerous articles, exhibition catalogs, periodicals. She's been co-editor of the Latin American Artists of the 20th Century for the Museum of Modern Art. She's taught and lectured and participated in discussions all over the U.S. and Latin America. Focus is primarily on Latin American art. Her forthcoming monograph is a major work on the Mexican photographer Lola Alvarez Bravo, coming out for Aperture, accompanied by also a major exhibit of Lola Bravo's images, which Elizabeth curated as well. It will open in New York, is that right? And then it opens in New York in September. The book comes out in,
I hope September.
yeah, we hope in September. And then it will travel to venues throughout the U.S. and perhaps abroad as well. Steve Harrigan is an English major. And we want everyone to know it. You and Garrison Keeler would be proud of you, because he's done right well. He's contributed to Rolling Stone, The Atlantic Monthly, Esquire, Texas Observer. He became a regular writer for Texas Monthly very shortly after its inception, ultimately becoming a senior editor. He still contributes. As a matter of fact, he has a brand new novel coming out in just a matter of days, or weeks.
About a week and a half.
A week and a half, called Challenger Park, and it's excerpted in the current issue of Texas Monthly, so we're all looking forward to it. His first novel, Aransas, he completed when he was Adobe Paisano Fellow, and he's recently finished a screenplay of Aransas, and is seeking funding if any of you are interested.
I've got one I'm looking for funding.
Bill's looking too. Elizabeth, do you have a screenplay? How many of us have screenplays? His second novel, Jacob's Well, was named one of the best books of 1984 by the Washington Post and Dallas Morning News. He has written a number of very well-received nonfiction books on nature primarily, A Natural State, Essays on Texas, Water and Light, and Comanche Midnight, and other essays. And then in 2000, he published the wonderful and critically very well received The Gates of the Alamo, a critical and popular success. And then from Knopf as well, Challenger Park comes out, as we mentioned, in just a few days. And during all the time that he was writing and working for Texas Monthly, while he was resting, he wrote screenplays, in particular scripts for television productions, such as the HBO production of The Last of His Tribe, The King of Texas, which was a Hallmark production, Beyond the Prairie, which was on CBS, and most recently The Colt, which was an adaptation of a Michael Sholokoff short story. And because of that production, Steve was nominated this year for a Writers Guild of America award for his adaptation of The Colt. He's currently working on a movie for ESPN on Joe Namath, Broadway Joe, and he's adapting for Lifetime Network a cheerful little Friedrich Dürrenmatt piece called The Visit. And some of you may remember it. It was a movie with Ingrid Bergman and Anthony Quinn. Fairly dark, as I recall. We're very happy to have Steve on our advisory committee, and we're also proud and very fortunate to have his writing archives here at the Southwestern Writers Collection. This is it's just a real delight to have all these wonderful folks here tonight and have all of you here to listen to them, and so I'd like to introduce them.
And now it's pretty much time to go. I might tell you where the title came from. Sally and I have a friend in Mexico who has considerable pesos, a very nice house and so on. And one morning he got up and his gardener had not trimmed the hedges, he had not swept the leaves, he had not watered the plants. And so our friend really irritated at him, and he scolded him. And the gardener said something back, so he fired him, and he essentially threw him out the door and into the street. About a month later, our friend and a friend of his were drinking, and they drank and they drank and they drank and they drank, and they got into an argument, which eventually got physical. And our friend whacked this guy. He fell back, hit his head on the stairs, and died. So he put him in the back seat of his car, and he drove him from San Miguel to was it Querétaro, to Cuernavaca. And of course he had sobered up by the time he got there, and he thought, well, I better turn myself in. I mean, the guy, his friend, his dead friend, is sitting in the back seat. And he goes to the police station, and he says, you know, I killed my friend. And the police said, where are you from? He said, San Miguel. He said, well, no, it's all right. If it's, I mean, basically they didn't want to deal with the murder. They said, no, it's all right. You just go back to San Miguel and tell the police, and it's all right. If y'all got in an argument, it was innocent. So he went back, and the police station is actually just a couple of blocks from where his business was. And he pulled up at the police station, and a cop came out and saw the dead guy sitting up in the back seat. And he said, what's happened here? And he said, we had an argument, and I hit him and killed him accidentally. But it's all right. And the cop said, well, no, it's not all right. And he said, well, no, you know. I asked some other police. They said, no, it's not all right. Get out of the car. And they put handcuffs on him, and they took him upstairs to the jail. And they unlocked a cell and ushered him in. And he sat down. They closed it. They locked it. They left. And he looked up, and his former gardener was sitting right across from him. And the gardener said, he said, Carlos, La Vida Brinca. Life jumps. So that's where the title comes from. We don't really know what we're doing up here. We'll talk about the pictures, we'll talk about the process, whatever you like. It's a project I started 10 years ago. To some degree, I started because I so admired Keith Carter's photographs, and I wanted desperately not to try to copy him because I knew I would not come out looking good. So I went to pinhole cameras, which Keith had not done, and which looked very different than Keith's pictures, and just started fooling around with it. For 2 years, I've just experimented with the size of pinholes and the distance from the pinhole to the film and this and that and so on, and kind of got to the point where I started doing the kinds of things that you see in the show, which I like very much. And I can say that because I don't really feel totally responsible for those images. One of the wonderful things about using these cameras is that, at least speaking for myself, I can't truly envision what the picture is going to be because all the pictures are time exposures in a larger sense than all photography. Of course, it's time exposure. But these are 12 seconds, 15 seconds, sometimes an hour. There's one picture in there, I think, that's 2 hours. But my mind cannot accumulate what the film is seeing in that amount of time. So it's always sometimes a happy circumstance for me when I develop the proofs and I see what the film saw. But my eye never really saw what the film saw. So there are kind of two periods of really fun stuff when you're making these kind of pictures. One is when you take the picture, and the other is when you see it, if it's good. I'm hogging this. Elizabeth?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Connie and Bill and Carla for getting me out here. It's a pleasure to be back in Austin, and it's really a privilege to have the opportunity to write about your work and now to talk about it. Over the last year, taught a couple courses for younger photographers, and in doing this, I've just become so aware of this divide that we now have in the photography world between people that are accustomed to working with cameras that take film and going into the darkroom and working with silver gelatin or with color, various kinds of processes that have developed over a long period of time. And then suddenly in the 1990s, everything began to switch, and there's now this divide with people that are in school or who have just gotten out of school who've never been inside a darkroom and who maybe have used 35 millimeter cameras, but as teenagers, and they don't use them anymore. They don't use slides to show their work. They rely on computers to really see what their images are going to be. And it's just really clarified to me that whether you're working, and I'm not saying one is better than the other, because that could be a whole argument that we could have this evening. But what it's really put into focus for me is how important technology is for photographers. You know, whether you're an Ansel Adams purist who believes in never cropping, and you have certain attitudes about how a black and white print should be, or whether you're somebody who works with a digital camera and then downloads an image onto the screen and then begins to manipulate and change so that you're able to create something that camera never saw. You need to be able to use your technology in order to express what you as an artist want to do. You have to be able to master that technology. You can't let that technology master you. And when Bill invited me to write an essay for the book, what became so interesting to me was to see how an artist can use a technology that is almost by intention imperfect to create something very, very serious. A lot of kids do science experiments using pinhole cameras. I mean, I think there's even a picture of the sort of the Quaker Oats box that is kind of the standard thing that you'll find in textbooks or online. You know, how a kid can make a pinhole camera. And it's obviously the most low-tech way that you can go in terms of making an image. But what Bill has done is, as he said, he's sort of given up control. It's sort of a willful surrender. So that what ultimately happens is that he's allowing his intellectual side to merge with the intuition. And I think that's where the images are able to gain such dramatic power, such strength, such meaning. I was trained as an art historian, and so when I begin a project of any kind, I always like to go back to the roots of things. The roots of photography, is very interesting here because just up the road at UT is the very first photograph. I think it's just the most remarkable magic thing that Niepce's first photograph is here. And maybe some of you have seen it. It's a tiny little image, and it's very, very shadowy. And it's basically a picture that he took looking out the window of his studio or of an office. And you can barely make it out. You really kind of need to be told what it is. And it took Niepce an exposure of, I think, something like 8.5 hours to make that image. And when that happened, all the people that were scurrying back and forth, the horses and everything else that you could imagine in the 1830s, none of that is seen. There's only the buildings, the still things that are really visible in that photograph. So one can imagine that in Niepce's days and in the days of Daguerre and the creation of the daguerreotype, there was so much of the idea of chance and experimentation and exploration that entered in the equation of what's going to happen when you have a light-sensitive surface and a camera to capture that. And for me, what's so exciting about Bill's work is that his work also contains the same thing. Here we are now, over 150 years later, and in a certain sense, Bill Wittliff, with this mode of pinhole photography, is also capturing the accidental, sometimes the mistakes. He does know what he's doing with these cameras, and he's able to control quite a bit with them. Don't get me wrong. And Bill could talk more about this because he actually makes certain cameras to create certain images. But there's a certain part of it that's left to chance. And I think that in doing that, he's also letting that more emotional side of what he's thinking when he's seeing the image come out. And another thing that I was thinking in terms of his photography is to go back to not only to the roots of photography and the invention of photography, but go back to the word photography. What does that mean? It means to inscribe with light, or to write with light. And I think it's very apt that we're talking about the idea of writing a story, writing a picture when we talk about Bill Wittliff, because his roots are in written words. His roots are in telling stories. So what's happening with these photographs is that we have these little intimate stories. They're almost like brief histories. I mean, we're used to thinking of stories taking place over a period of days, or a history taking place over decades or a century. In this case, we're getting stories that last just a few seconds. But these are things that the naked eye can't see. So suddenly what is laid bare in these photographs are these sort of very intimate things that happen before our eyes every day, but that we can't see. The naked eye can't see them. And what Bill Wittliff was talking to me about when we first began working is that you have to be open to the chance. And I thought that was such a wonderful thing, because so many photographers, so many artists that work in many media want to be very exacting with their technique. They want to be able to control everything. And that's certainly something that you see a lot with people working with photography and people working with digital photography and computers. But Bill says, no, let's be open to the chance. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when light is able to touch the surface over a period of several seconds. And let's see the story that takes place. And the story that happens is something that I think really touches deep inside. It's really about about representing not just reality, but a heightened reality. The reality in these pictures is more the reality of the imagination. It's the reality of the enigmatic, the reality of dreams, the reality of our fears, the reality of the things that we most deeply believe in. I mean, all these things he's captured, and he's captured them with very, very simple things. The image called Jesus Wept, I think, is just a plastic statue. You know, and there's a lot of instances like that where the place where Bill was at, or the thing that he was looking at, was not necessarily so remarkable. But in allowing himself to be open to that chance, he's able to create something that I think is very exceptional. And for that reason, I want to thank Bill for sort of letting us into this world and think about the fact that these magical things are also happening for us every day in front of our eyes, and that we also just have to be open to the chance so that we can see them too, because they're there. And so I think it's a wonderful book and a wonderful exhibition, and it's really worth seeing, because the more that you look at these photographs, I think the more that we can all get out of them.
There's one photograph in particular that Elizabeth mentions in her introduction, which is called Spirit Animal. It's in the second gallery over here. It was taken in a cemetery in Harlingen. And if you look, in the upper left-hand corner, there is the head of a wolf, which is created by the wind blowing through the branches of a tree. But it is absolutely the head of a wolf. And that's the kind of thing that can happen with this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just being lucky, you know, just there for the chance. Steve, do you have nice things to say?
I was going to save them for your funeral, but I'll... Well, Bill may have invited Elizabeth to write the introduction to his book, but he didn't invite me. I went over to his office one day, and he was showing me these pinhole photographs, these Tragaluz photographs. And I said, I want to write the introduction to your book, because there was something so powerful and weird to me, and I'm sure you've all had that experience looking at them. To me, it was like I had looked at these photographs, and I felt like I had just woken up and had been sleepwalking and had seen all these images in my sleep. There was something so primal and weird and haunted about them, and I couldn't get over how they were so unlike any other photographs I'd ever seen. And I'm not an authority like Elizabeth. I haven't studied the art of photography in any meaningful historical way, but they did seem and do seem to me still completely original. And I think what, the remarkable thing Bill has done, we're so used to taking photography for granted. We've all been born into this world where there's photography, and we don't think about it very much. I mean, Keith Carter does, and people who are serious about photographs and people who are serious about looking at them. But for most of us, we have our little Canon ELPH, and we take snapshots, and we assume that what we take a picture of will show up on the screen or in the film. And what I think Bill has done is both in a real sense in terms of the actual cameras he uses, and in a kind of a metaphorical sense, he has taken us back to the roots of photography. He has stripped away all the technology, all the bells and whistles, all the things that we're used to taking for granted, so that what he has, ultimately, what he's using is really almost not an instrument at all. It's just this little thing with a little tiny hole in it and a piece of photographic paper that enables an image to be captured there. So in a way, I think why we react so strongly to these photographs, why they seem both so familiar and so strange to us, is that we're seeing them not through somebody's aperture, but through somebody's eye. They are registering on our minds in the same way they kind of registered in the camera. And I think it's a daring thing to do, to sort of divest yourself of all that technology, and in a way to kind of travel back in time to use the technology, even almost more primitive technology than the first photographs, in a way, to conjure up this world that is sort of there but unseen. The ghostly forms and the ambivalent gestures and the haunted images in the background, those are not just. I mean, in one sense, those are, of course, just things the camera happened to pick up. But in the other sense, they're things that were there that we could not see, but that by virtue of Bill and these cameras are now there's a permanent record of. So I am a big fan of these pictures from the very first moment I saw them. It seemed to me that Bill has created this way of seeing the world in a way that nobody has thought about doing in a long time. So back to you, Bill.
Perhaps some of you have some nice things to say. It is a kind of mystical journey, because the human eye simply does not see what the film sees. I mean, we were talking about that earlier. I mean, it's the accumulation of time on a piece of film. In fact, I think really what goes on for me is that it's not really so much an image that's being collected at all, but a body of time. Those pictures, most of them are probably, a half a second to 10 or 12 seconds. And that sounds very quick. Everybody just listen. Everybody just be real quiet, and I'm going to go 10 seconds. And this is how long 10 seconds is. Now, the world moves an enormous distance in that length of time. That was 10 seconds by my count. That was in Mississippi. But my eye cannot accumulate that time, but that film can. And then through the process of developing the film and printing the film and so on, then there is a physical record. I mean, it is now manifest in the world. And when you do a portrait of somebody, 10 seconds, it is a totally different kind of portrait than if you do it in 1/100th of a second, say, because it invites a participation with a subject that simply doesn't exist when you just click. I mean, it's totally different. I mean, it is all of a sudden, it is a dialogue with the film. And I find it utterly fascinating about this process. So, do you have questions you'd like to ask about these things?
Mike does over there.
Hey, Mike.
Elizabeth was talking about the lack of control. And when you have the lack of control, you also have a frustration factor. How difficult was that to you to manage?
You know, I started this so I would not have control. I mean, I wanted to get away from the whole intellectual process of thinking about it. I just wanted an instrument that you could go from a feeling to an exposure. You know, and see, these cameras you don't even look through. I mean, you just hold them. And as I went on with it, I mean, I used to hold them like this, but then I'd hold them like this, and then I'd move them. And just because it's just play. It's just fun, you know. And J. Frank Dobie told me years and years and years ago that luck is being ready for the chance. And that's what Elizabeth and I were talking about, you know, that you just be ready for the chance. Take a chance. Now, these are not the only pictures I took. These are the ones that made it to the wall. You know, there are an enormous number, you know, that didn't make it anywhere. But I got to the point with these cameras that I could pretty much take an okay picture any time. But going from okay to something that you think, you know, that's pretty good. Keith has a much better record than I do. And so does James Evans, who I saw come in a minute ago, but he's not listening to what we're saying. He's talking to DJ. So that whole business of luck is being ready for the chance. I mean, that was the whole idea of doing this kind of photography, Mike. I mean, I didn't want to think about it. I just wanted an instrument where I didn't have to think. Because once you start thinking, then essentially you're controlling. You're saying, oh, you know, you're predetermining or pre-visualizing what the picture is going to be and so on. I didn't want to do that. I had done that. And that's why I started to do this kind of thing, or one of the reasons I started to do this. I love these things. I don't really feel they're mine in the way I would if I was knocking them out at a hundredth of a second with, you know, a camera that figures out everything and so on. It's just like something, I'm there and something passes through and hits a film, and occasionally, you know, it's kind of wonderful and pleases me. Any other questions? Mark?
Could you just talk about the one that's behind you?
In San Miguel, in June every year, they have a thing called the Day of the Locos, and it only happens in San Miguel, and people dress up in all kinds of costumes, and they just simply, you know, parade down the street. It's got a little more commercial in the last several years, where companies do it and have their employees do it and so on. And now, this is a good example.
Sure.
When I took this picture, this lady is about this far from me, where Elizabeth is. I've got my camera's shooting like that. And the camera's literally there. She's walking by. She stops just for a second. I'm probably shooting at a tenth of a second. You know, so it's like that. I didn't even see, well, you can barely see it here, but you can see it in the photograph. I didn't even see the guy who's behind her with a sombrero and walking. But then, you know, there he is when I developed the film and stuff. Now, consciously I didn't see that. You know, I don't know whether I saw it, you know, but that's fun.
Well, Bill, can I jump in and ask you a question? Because consciously, you must be doing something in terms of deciding on the subjects that you're taking. I mean, my favorite picture, and it's two pictures in the book. It's called The House of the Workers. Is that the title?
Yeah, The House of the Workers.
And it's the most bland building in existence. It's just two photographs of this, basically a kind of barracks for migrant workers. And I don't think anybody would have taken a picture of that for any particular reason. But I'm just fascinated by, you were drawn to that object, that absolutely plain, grubby object for some reason. What was there something that impelled you to take a picture of this building, or was it just?
No, actually, that is a building that's in the middle of a cotton field. And when Sally and I have gone to South Pottery for years, we drove by it. And before I started pinhole stuff, Sally said, you better get a picture of that because it's going to disappear one of these days. Because we'd always remark on it, And then I started doing the Tragaluz stuff. Incidentally, I call my cameras Tragaluzes. Tragaluzes cameras are Tragaluz cameras. Where that comes from is in Mexico, there are a lot of homes with vaulted brick ceilings. And right down the middle of them, they'll have clear glass bricks, to let light in. And those are called Tragaluz or Tragaluzes, which means light swallowers. I didn't want to call my cameras pinhole cameras because Steve Clark would call me Senor Pinhole. and I didn't want to be known as Senor Pinhole. So I got uppity and called them Tragaluz. But, basically I was obeying my wife.
But there was something about this building
Yeah.
that drew you to it. What was it?
I think there were a lot of ghosts, I think. And I don't know. But that was the idea of doing this stuff, is not to think about it. Just if you were moved to follow that and take a picture of that, well, then you have the instrument for it, And that's so it was really that. It was just, kind of follow your bliss. Something looked interesting, And there's some of these things that I shot, over a period of 3 or 4 years, where I'd shoot it and then, it didn't really say anything, but I was attracted to what it was. The door knocker is an example. The hand that's holding the pepper, which is a door knocker in San Miguel. It's a colonial door knocker. And I was really struck by that. I don't know why. And I photographed it and photographed it and photographed it. The guy with the pigeons, I photographed him, different times over a 3-year period, and it's that the birds were moving so fast always in my, I was shooting at a half a second or a second, and I just got nothing but fuzz. But little by little, I got a good picture. And then he disappeared. Every morning for years and years, he had been on the plaza feeding the pigeons at 11:30. And I took a picture, went home, made a print. Months later, I came back, gave him a print, never saw him again. He just simply vanished. There's a picture of a fellow sitting on the curb. He's wearing a sombrero. He was an ice cream salesman. Wonderful, sweet man. I photographed him. God, this is starting to sound like it's a bad thing to be doing. But shortly thereafter, he was struck by lightning and killed. And I apologize.
This question's for Elizabeth.
Yes.
What do you like most about teaching photography?
I like the fact that it's mostly younger people, and that they might have very different points of view about the work. And my art history training was very traditional and very Eurocentric, and it was only very gradually that I sort of learned about art internationally, and have always tried to read new theories. But students kind of will kind of hone in on the things. They often, especially art students, aren't really interested in that much theory. They're interested in how something is made and why you made it. And that's sort of really one of the things that I think Bill and I talk a lot about. I mean, why did you go out and make these photographs, and what do they mean to you? And then I tried to come and put some other overlays, so, some of the ideas about what they mean to me. But in the end, I think that's really the most important thing. I mean, how do you, standing in front of that image, react? Is it meaningful for you? I mean, it's one thing if a photograph or any kind of work of art is really, really well made. I mean, there's an awfully lot of good technicians right now in Chelsea galleries making really amazingly good paintings that sell for a lot of money, and photographs too. But the bigger issue for me is, why? Why did you do it? And does it move me in some way? Maybe for some works it'll move my intellect, and some works it'll move my emotion. But it's that kind of dialogue with students, because one of the things that frustrates me with students is they often don't know the history. And so they might see something and think that it's, an incredibly original thing, and I'm like, well, no, somebody did something very much like this in the 70s or 80s. So I think sometimes students don't bring that broader history. But on the other hand, students bring a very refreshing point of view towards things. And so I think, ultimately you end up teaching each other. And I think that's sort of the best case scenario, especially with artists, where it's, really, very much about trying to get the artist to do his best work.
How did you choose which photographs to put in the book? Did you ask, were there certain photographs that a lot of people seemed to respond to, or did you just choose the ones that you liked best?
Kind of the way I go is that when I take the picture, that's me talking. But once I make the print, then I try to see what the photographs say to me. Now, for me, these pictures and their arrangement basically are plotting two journeys. One is the history of Mexico, and the other is a metaphysical journey, which has to do, well, Elizabeth talks about it a bit in her introduction and so on. And I think had that not happened, had I not started seeing those photographs as two kinds of journeys, there are probably a number of those photographs that would not have been in there because I wouldn't have thought they would have stood on their own. But for me, they work very nicely in the form of two journeys. And Elizabeth picked up on that, I think. In fact, you want to talk about it?
Well, I think what's really nice is when an artist matches their subject matter to their medium. And in the case, what Bill was talking about is these cameras are light-swallowing cameras, and they capture accumulations of time. And so many of these photographs are about either history or journeys. So there's at least one photograph that alludes to the Spanish conquest of the Americas. There's photographs like this one that talk about Mexican rituals that are quite ancient, but that live today. It's about life in San Miguel, which still continues to have a lot of echoes of history and tradition. It's about the border region, and how that continues to change. So there's this idea of history and overlay and tradition. And then, as Bill mentioned, it's also about a spiritual journey. So in the fact that he is using this type of photography that literally accumulates time, it seems to me that it's a very appropriate way to try to interpret these things. And I think that's why they kind of grab us, because they do seem to kind of carry this sort of weight of history, or this idea of memory, I think, also within so many of the images.
You'll to really follow this, you'll all need to buy a book. It's easier to get it.
There's a lot more in the book.
If you have the book. But as an example, though, it starts with an image of a face in a hand. The face is actually from a santo in Mexico. The hand is Fran Cristina's, and Fran is here. Fran was the drummer for the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and he held in song. But the title of the picture is The Seeker, and that, from a metaphysical standpoint or a spiritual standpoint, that stands for all of us. From the standpoint of the history of Mexico, it was the Spanish seeking a new world. It goes from there to a picture which is used twice in the book called the Eternal Return, which is, part of some metaphysics is that reincarnation, people come back and they leave, and then they come back, and then they leave, and then they come back, and so on. That picture is actually there twice, in the front, and you go through the two cycles, and you go through a death sequence, and then right at the very end, the next to last picture is the eternal return again. And the picture after that is of our pregnant daughter holding her stomach, and it's called The New World. And that really works for me. So these things, I mean, I'm not trying to shove them in anybody's face or not, but it is how my mind works. And those pictures work for me on those bases, including the history. So, but you know, a good picture, whether it's a painting or a photograph or a drawing or a poem or whatever, what's important is what they say to you, because art really, the best art mirrors what you need at the moment you're looking at it. It's not that it tells you anything. You know, it's helping you tell yourself something you knew just forgot you knew. And I keep pointing at Keith because Keith's work really does this. More questions. I'm starting to pontificate now. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry, Keith. No, yes, ma'am.
I just want to say I'm not a photographer and the daughter of Army photographer. Only read one book on photography in my life, which was Photography by Eric Mayer. But after seeing the pictures, I went to see what was in here, and as a matter of fact, it's on this floor. And I was looking for a paragraph that's been with me since I read it 20 years ago, the only paragraph about photography I knew, which was that maybe photography is most related to human beings as gatherers, because the photographer goes and gathers. And I'd never seen photographs that I thought more truly were human and represented what humans need, that Eric Mayer had pointed out maybe all photography was toward than
Thank you, ma'am. Keith?
Well, my question is for Stephen. I'm struck, I've always admired your writing, but I'm struck that you, by your own admission, you don't have a great depth in the history of photography, and this is a remarkable decade, coherent body of work that you were immediately drawn to. And my question is, do you find any correlation between, you write fiction as well as nonfiction, the act of writing and the act of how Bill goes about this work, which is basically unknown, long exposures of time and memory and thought?
That's a great question. Did everybody hear it? Keith was asking, is there any correlation between writing, which Bill also does, is a master at, and the process of writing and the process by which Bill created these pictures, which is just these long duration exposures. I mean, the answer, I think, has to be yes and no. I mean, writing is a much more intellectually active thing. It has to be, because you have to, get the margins right and everything when you're typing. But you have to. Well, not Bill. Bill, special case as always. But all right. But I think in some ways, I mean, I'm not one of these people who believes that you write unconsciously, but I do think you keep your aperture open, and it takes me often half a lifetime to develop the idea for a book, and you're just waiting for these thoughts and images to sort of gather enough force to register on the little photographic paper in your mind. And so I think it's very much similar in that way, is that you're a kind of you're sort of actively searching out your subjects like Bill does in these photos, and you're also passively accepting the sensations that sort of stream through, and then later you make sense of that and try to, either in the darkroom or in the editing process. And it's fascinating to me, speaking of editing, that my favorite photograph possibly that Bill has taken with his Tragaluz cameras is not in the book. It's a wonderful image of a sea turtle skull on the beach. I think he stole the sea turtle skull from David Everett. I'm not sure.
Borrowed it.
Borrowed it.
And broke it. And thank you for mentioning that. David's here.
But it sort of reinforces what he was talking about, that there is a theme, whether it's, you now know what the theme is. I think you speak about it pretty openly, but I would guess at the time you were starting to put together this book, you didn't have a real sharp, coherent idea of the theme. You were just going mostly on what felt right together.
By the time I was actually putting the book together, I did. But when I was making the pictures, I didn't. There's a wonderful phrase, which is, how do I know what I think until I see what I say? How do I know what I think until I see what I say? And to some degree, that is the story of these pictures. I'm just by feel moved to take a picture of this, and then later you look at it, and then later you look at 4 of them that you took at different times, and all of a sudden they make little groups, and they seem to, whereas one of them's a word, 3 of them become a sentence, 10 of them become a paragraph, and you didn't know you knew that. But it is some part of you, I think. And this is what writing is. I mean, that all of a sudden says, here's what you think. You weren't conscious of it, but here it is. Boy, that's fun.
Can you tell us about that? You're looking at Darkroom and bringing these images to life. I know you captured them and didn't see them in your mind that then was starting down the side.
Well, in the Darkroom, I mean, they're pretty much straight images. I mean, I do, burn and dodge and so on. The chemicals. Mary Levy, who's here tonight, was my great companion in the Darkroom for many years on these Tragaluz pictures. But I mixed my own chemicals. I came up with that toning stuff. But I love the Darkroom. But there's not real manipulation going on other than just this darker, this a little lighter. It's pretty straight stuff, really. Faustinus.
Any picture of the wise gardener?
On the wall in the jail. Well, Connie.
Yeah, I just wanted you to maybe say a word or two about the wonderful picture of the church at Rochester House and sort of how it was you were brave enough to take a picture of a building that every artist in the world has either painted or photographed or written about.
Ignorance is bliss, Connie. I assume most of you have either seen that church at Rochester House or seen pictures of it. I mean, it's probably the most photographed church in the United States. I tried to photograph it a number of times, but I never got anything that said more than, well, here's the church at Rochester House. So I came home and I made a camera that was the equivalent of an 8mm lens, though of course my cameras are no lenses at all. But that means it literally photographs like that. I mean, if I took a picture here, it'd get my feet. So I made a camera think, okay, will this do it? And for me, it did. And it's the back of the church. But it's a huge adobe structure. It is surrounded by buildings. There are high lines and so on, but this camera is under all that. So, and I really like that picture. I think that's probably the best picture I've ever made. I couldn't hear Mark. Have y'all all seen it? Yeah, that is a room in the Bullring, and there's always a gurney in there and a medicine cabinet, and that's where they take bullfighters who've been gored or trampled or whatever, and so it is in fact the room where bullfighters die. Now, there's a guy on the gurney, and I'm assuming you guys know which picture we're talking about. Now, that guy is one of the following. He is either a bullfighter who's been gored, or he's a guy who fell off a Coca-Cola truck out on the street, or he's the groundskeeper that I woke up when I was taking his picture. So, but if you should look at that picture. But it is in fact what the title says. It's the room where the bullfighters died.
Well, but in keeping with what you were talking about that, wind was drawn by the wind, I mean, this is some spiritual stuff.
I know, and there are a number of pictures there's another one that's next to the spirit animal, just to the right of it. It's called the Fallen Angel, and I don't even remember taking that picture. But if you look at it, it is a skull that's looking at you. But if you just put your hand just over the skull, you'll see the back of another guy's head with his arms outstretched, reaching toward heaven, which of course is the fallen angel. That's the whole story of the fallen angel. I had no consciousness at all of even taking the picture, much less, But that happens all the time with this stuff, and it's because you're accumulating time, and the accumulation of time sometimes says something far different than what you think you're seeing.
Back up a step on that one, where the bullfighters died. What, that you followed them in there, et cetera, because your point is that the film captures stuff your eye doesn't see.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't.
Yeah. It just does. I mean,
Tell what you did.
I just took the picture. You tell, yeah.
The bullfighter got hurt, you saw him take him down there, you followed him.
Yeah,
down?
follow him in.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
But that's the guy on the gurney.
And was he dead?
I don't know.
Well, it's interesting, though, because there is, what Sally has exposed here is that there's a lot of deliberation more deliberation that goes into these pictures than you might think. There are props to some degree.
Well,
there are
there-
models, right?
Well, no, there are moments that he thinks this may be interesting.
Right.
And so,
And again, it's this business of it's luck is being ready for the chance.
Mhm.
The eternal return, which is the cover of the book. What that is I turn the camera upside down, just looking straight up to the sky, and I have a little Christ figure, hand carved in Mexico, and I just turned it upside down like this over the pinhole, and that's where that picture came from. There's another picture which I love enormously, which is called Meteor Storm. It's the ship, and you see the meteors and stuff. What that is, that's a little ship in a bottle. The ship is about that big. The bottle's it's actually small. It's about like this and about like that. Connie gave that to me years ago, and I just waded out into the Gulf of Mexico, held it by the deal, put the pinhole against the bottle, took a picture. And the meteor, what looks like a meteor storm, are actually flaws in the glass of the bottle. So, yes, ma'am.
The one with the man carrying the skull?
That's,
Is that a prop?
no, I think that really is a skull, and that's on a parade in Mexico on Easter Sunday. So it was a religious parade.
yeah.
You say that most of the pictures that you look at field sort of graph line, and you're seeing an image and you're seeing right in front of you. How is that field translated in the images that you see after you come out of the darkroom? Is it the exact same field that drove you to click the snapshot? Or is it transformed somehow?
I'm not sure I understand the question. When I say feel, I mean, I try not to think. I get in trouble when I think. So just trying to go with it, and you're moved to, oh, that looks interesting, or you're drawn to that, and so you just kind of go to it, and you try it this way. Well, maybe you try it this way. Maybe you try it this way. Maybe you come back and try it the next year, and so on. But it's always a bit of a surprise what shows up on the film. It's not the same, as what you thought you were doing. Because, again, I'm speaking for myself, but, my eyes simply cannot accumulate time the way the film can. The film takes every fragment of a second, and it locks it on that piece of film. My eye it comes in and it goes out, and then I'm on to the next image. And I don't think that's explaining maybe what you asked, but
And actually it is, because that was part of the question that I could say was, frankly, this is all a big game of chance. Right?
absolutely. And that is the great joy of it. Luck is being ready for the chance. So you walk by something, the old man with the magic eye, is that in this show? Actually, Connie and I were down to Mexico. That guy was standing on the street. He had one eye. He was very generous to let me take a picture. I did not consciously see the woman step out behind him. And of course, she stopped. She stepped out. She hesitated. She moved on. But it makes a nice picture. Again, there are hundreds and hundreds that didn't make nice pictures, or didn't make pictures beyond just being okay pictures. Somebody had a question over there, or maybe not.
Can I make a comment on that? Recently, a photographer who's very well known for working with digital photography asked me to somehow be involved with his photographs or do some editing or something. And he was explaining to me his process, and he says, well, I might take about 5,000 pictures in an afternoon. And so you're going to have to look through like tens and tens and tens of thousands. And it just made me think, in his idea, well, of course you're going to get something good. And, I think any one of us would get something good if we took 5,000 pictures each day. Even though Bill may have hundreds that are not what he wants to include in the book, that might not be for whatever reason, I think that there's still this idea that there's chance, but there's also deliberation, and there's also experience and intellect that all come into the mix in terms of sort of where you go with that camera and what you decide to do with it at what moment. That makes something. This is a very, very different approach than just, I'm going to click 1,000 times and see what happens.
No, it's not that. It's not that I don't feel responsible for them. It's just a part of me, that I don't hold in my consciousness until I see the picture. And then I recognize it as a part of me. And I pretty much think that's true in every serious creative pursuit. Well, like Elizabeth, a novelist. You write and then you look at it and you say, yeah. There's some part of you that has brought this into the world, made it manifest, which is, that's one of the great joys of a creative life, is to, reach down, however well or not well you do, into the depths of your soul, hoping that what you come up with somehow communicates to other people, because that's what artists are always doing. They want to belong. We want to matter to everybody, through our work. And if you can grab what's inside you and show it, it's also what's inside everybody else, because we're all the same guy on this spinning planet. And however you get that, I couldn't really get it consciously, so I started pursuing it, unconsciously, saying, okay, I'm tired of thinking about this shit. How about you do it? And I think that's really kind of what we all do. We just pursue it from different angles, but that's what we're doing. We're trying to say, hey, look at this. This might matter to you. It might please you. It might make you think. It might make you reject it, but in rejection, you define some portion of yourself.
That's not life. That's what we each do with our own lives.
No, I think so.
I know that you're getting into digital
struggling.
Struggling, yes. Have you seen any of that work, Elizabeth?
No, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm curious to, well, again, talking about having that luxury of endless, being able to take 5,000 images in one day. And also, too, with the title, the Tragaluz and Light Swallower, is so much that I think does come from the Darkroom. I'm curious to see, are you going to keep calling them Tragaluzas, even though...
If they sell. Speaking of which, maybe we should go do books. This is any last questions? And James Evans, do you have a question? Thank you guys very much, and let me also thank Elizabeth and Steve, who make my pictures shine with their words, and I'm hugely appreciative. And let me thank also Connie, who makes this whole place shine with the staff. And so thank you all very much.